Yes, I did want to thank Hannah Deans and DBS for organizing this series of mental health dialogues and asking me to facilitate the discussion. I'm a Canadian based in Glasgow, Scotland, and I'm deeply interested in the subject matter for a number of reasons. Hannah's referred to one of the reasons for this, some of the work I've done recently. But yes, intensely interested in creativity, genius, and mental health. As a recent film curator for a mental health festival, I've finished my work with the Mental Health Foundation in the UK, but I'm looking at continuing that work elsewhere. Stay tuned. I'm a film producer, so I have encouraged and managed creative people. I think of myself as a creative producer, as someone involved in shaping work, for example, story consultation, editing suite advice, on and on and on. Also, I'm a sometime creative. I've been a songwriter. I like to think of myself as one still, even though I haven't done as much as I'd like to lately. I'm now directing documentary film, but I would consider myself more of a shadow artist over the course of my professional career, as someone that has facilitated much more than I create. I'm also someone who has had his own mental health challenges. I've been on antidepressants. I have spent time in therapy. And these last 2 points, being a shadow artist and having mental health challenges, I can say are not unrelated, and we may get into that a bit later. So that's me for the moment. I will set the scene for this discussion a little more after introducing our panelists here. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Like I say, I'll set up our discussion. We have about an hour for the discussion up here, and then we want to turn it over to you essentially to come to us with your comments and questions. With my panelists here, I'm very appreciative of them joining me today, and I look forward to hearing their experiences and their offering of insights. To my immediate left, I have Andrew Ferguson, aka Nomine, formerly Outrage. I think I've got that all right.
Correct.
A musical artist and producer who has also set up a education base, which is a varied approach to music and arts education. To Andrew's left, we have Isabella Cruz Pantoja, who is a DBS student from Brazil, an artist and producer, and she hopes her music makes herself and others a little less lonely. I think that's lovely the way she's put that. To my immediate right, we have Ellie Griffiths, aka Lamia, who is a DBS student as well. She's from London. She's a producer and vocalist, and if the information I got on the internet is correct, an EP coming out this summer?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to double check that. And then to her right, we have Mal Rempkin, who is a filmmaker, author, illustrator, entrepreneur, DBS tutor, and his online bio has some wonderful advice. Be patient and work hard. I think we're done. Let's all go home now. No, there's much more to this night than just that. But briefly, before I go to the panelists, I want to provide some context on this subject matter. So the title of tonight's session is Myth of the Creative Genius. And the way I'm thinking of this, we're looking at the mythologies around creativity, genius, and mental health. It's long been suggested that there are links between mental health challenges. One extreme way of putting it is madness and artistic achievement, and also links between artistic achievement and genius. So in the first place, what I'll refer to as creativity and madness. This is a complex and contentious area. We're not going to get through everything tonight. No surprise here. I said to Hannah recently that I see that there's a traveling conference that's called Creativity and Madness. So if they can spend days traveling the world with this, we'll not get through it in an hour, but we'll do our best. But there have been some suggestions that creative people are more likely to experience mental health challenges, and that mental health challenges may assist in creative endeavor. The research is disputed, but I think it's undeniable that there has been a romanticization of madness and creativity, the link between the two, and that the drama of that is appealing. It's attention-getting, versus the work of artists who are, generally speaking, without mental health issues and just get on with the work. I think there's no dispute, even looking at all these various opinions and surveys, that the majority of artists are seen not to have mental health issues. So I think that's something we have to keep in mind over the course of this conversation. So to me, important questions in this context, being at an art school, if I can put it that way, is there any truth to be found in the mythology that we're talking about? Is the mythology, however true, as in the dramatization, this link between mental health and creativity and madness and creativity, helpful to creative people as artists and individuals? Is the mythology helpful? And then moving on to the second case, the links between creativity and genius. Some artists are said to have God-given talent, however problematic that talent is. And genius is a term that's used more and more as time goes on. Again, an important question, how helpful is this mythology to our everyday work as artists? There's a quote that I have here from a wonderful book that I recommend to all of you called Art and Fear. Ordinary art means something like all art not made by Mozart. After all, art is rarely made by Mozart-like people. While geniuses may get made once a century or so, good art gets made all the time. So what I think we want to do is both, to use the physician's motto, do no harm, but also encourage creative achievement. No, it's not always an easy balance to strike, but that's what I'm looking at in my work. So I want to start with provocation, Scott, a statement that I hope will bring some opinion from my panelists up here, perhaps heated, perhaps not. I told them they're free to disagree with me. We'll see how it goes. So this is a statement that they can agree with and illuminate their agreement with me or dispute or back that up. So this is my statement to start, and then I'll get on to questions I have for the panelists. Whatever the links between mental health and creativity, the healthier the person, the better for their art. So I'll say that again. This is my statement, my provocation, my opinion. Whatever the links between mental health and creativity, the healthier the person, the better for their art. Panelists, I've given you some time as I've gone on with my introduction here. So maybe, Mal, I'll start with you.
Good.
Remember, right? I'm looking at you.
The question?
Sure.
I'm the statement.
Talk to there. Whatever the links between mental health and creativity, the healthier the person, the better for their art. Would you agree to that? Would you disagree with that?
The healthier the person. It's funny. I just now got out of a class for 3 hours where I was teaching storytelling. We were talking about how the magic power that a story has that is unique to that medium is that it has the ability to ignite in another person an emotion that you're feeling in yourself, and an ability to communicate that emotion through the medium of story. And it's really important that as a storyteller, you are in tune with the emotions that you have and are willing to open yourself up to them and make them public in a way. Even if you're writing a sci-fi or a Western or some kind of crazy, outlandish story, if it's not rooted in some sort of authentic emotion that you yourself feel and are connected to, and that you are willing to explore, your story can come off inauthentic. And I think the best stories, even including the best sort of speculative fiction or fantasy, I'm just using that because it's an extreme example of fiction, the best ones of those are rooted somehow in a really authentic human emotion and feeling that we have. But in order to get to that, you kind of have to dig inside yourself. And so we did some storytelling from our own lives and from our own past experiences. We talked about difficult decisions that we had to make. We talked about childhood possessions we had and the importance that had to us, and how we could use those emotions that we felt and then wrap it in a story that was something else. And so it's a useful sort of method to, and that's why I think storytelling is therapeutic for a lot of people, because it allows you to dig at those emotions within you without actually having to explain them literally. That said, I don't think that that doesn't mean that you have to go in search of pain in order to find that those emotions. They don't have to be bubbling right at the surface in order for them to be authentic or meaningful to somebody else. Does that make sense?
Okay, no, that's a great statement. And so you would say that, I mean, you have to do some digging, but you don't necessarily want to dig so much that it becomes difficult for you personally, and that might have issues for your art making.
I think you should dig as far as you can, and the farther you're willing to go, the more interesting your art will be. I just don't think you have to seek pain I think you have to seek new pain and new suffering in order to find those feelings. I think we all have enough. We have a wealth of trauma and drama to draw upon just in our everyday lives and things we've had to deal with all the way back to childhood. There's no need to go out and seek specifically new ones in order for that to...
Right. And a healthy person can make great art.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because even a healthy person has had unhealthy moments. Nobody's been through their life completely untouched by disappointment or by unhappiness in some way. And those moments are totally worth mining, even if you are, a completely healthy person, especially if you are a completely healthy person.
Okay, well, Ellie, what do you think? I mean, to go back to the statement, the healthier the person, the better for their art. Would you agree? Do you disagree?
I think like when you go into those spaces, you have to have something to come back to. Like you have to have a base, and then you can go off from the base and like dig into other areas of your mind. But then you have to be able to like walk out the studio and go home and like be okay. Because I think like people that I've been around who are producers who haven't had that, they can make like amazing stuff and they're really talented, but they can't do anything with it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like a track on their computer and they can't function enough to like put it out or finish things or, yeah. And I don't know if this is a bit controversial, but I don't really think it's about digging either. Like I think...
Maybe it doesn't have to be, yeah.
Yeah, like I think not so much finding places within yourself, but like allowing those things to come out. So instead of like sitting in a room thinking, oh my God, I have to write about this event, it's really affected me. Like if you just if you're patient and you go in the studio and you kind of think about it, there'll just come a time where it will come out naturally and you don't have to like force yourself into a certain space to be able to create. And I think like ultimately we're doing it because we love it and we're passionate about it, because it's not really the kind of career that you want to go into if you're not, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, I just think forcing things is not necessarily the best way.
And one thing I was going to say around the idea of the better, well, I said the better for their art, not necessarily for the art. So, I mean, even whether someone is digging or someone is sort of letting it come forth more naturally.
Yeah.
However that experience informs the art, it's probably good that there's an opportunity for the art to be made, that you, as you refer to, that there's a base that you can go home and have a place where you can be productive, as opposed to just always digging or always waiting, is maybe a way to put it.
Exactly, and like being authentic doesn't necessarily have to be in the creation stage either. Like a lot of songwriters are very talented and they can write songs that are really sad, but then it's given to Adele and she sings it in a way which is like 100% believable. So I don't think like art making like necessarily has to come from like a raw place in order for it to be outstanding, in my opinion.
Thanks for that, Ellie. And then just moving across, I'll try not to just keep going back and forth like this. But Andrew, the healthier the person, the better for their art.
The healthier I am, the better it is for my art. Because if I wasn't healthy, I wouldn't be making my art. Because from my experiences, I'd be dead right now. I had to give up drinking 5 years ago because I got caught up in the DJ lifestyle. I wasn't an alcoholic, but when I drank a lot. And that caused a lot of my mental health issues like anxiety and depression. So the healthier I am, it's great for my art because it means my art's still here 20 years on. And I know people that have not made it, not lived, or they've had to just give up the art because it's come to a point where they can't sustain that lifestyle.
There can be short bursts of intense living and intense creativity, but we want you to still be here, and we wish some of those people were still here that aren't, even though they did create great art.
Yeah, and I think my best art comes from experimentation. And in the past, I may have used other things as excuses to experiment, but actually, I know now that that's not needed. My art comes from just being inspired by different things, other music and people, my journey. Yeah, our life, naturally, there's drama and situations anyway, which contribute towards us as artists, what we represent. I certainly don't think you need to go looking for it. I agree. I think there's enough drama in our life to experience and put those sorts of emotions into your art. So yeah, for me, I need to be healthy. Otherwise, there won't be no me, and there won't be no art.
Well, thanks for that, Andrew. And Isabella, what would you have to say to that? Does one have to? Well, again, just to put it the way I have to the others, is it true that the healthier the person, the better for their art over time?
Well, I will agree with everyone else. And I think it's important to mention that there's a difference between hard life experiences and bad experiences and then mental illness, and how those can lead to good art, because overall you're at a good place in your life, you're overcoming something, and mental illness has it's such a big difference. It's something ongoing, and yeah, like you said, you wouldn't make anything at all. Yeah.
There are many commentaries from across the spectrum that pretty much seem to agree with the idea that no matter what one's experiences are, whether they've dug deep into that, or whether they've had tragedies in their lives they mine for their art, that whatever that is, that one has to be, to get back to Andrew's point, that one has to be healthy at a certain point to be productive over time.
Yeah, and to share that. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
There's more to art than just the art itself. I think that's something kind of you were saying, is that
yeah.
It's one thing if you're a miserable genius sitting in a hole somewhere, making incredible art that you then that then dies with you in that hole, right? Art has to go somewhere. In order for it to go somewhere, you have to be functioning in a way that's going to be able to, like you said, meet deadlines and create goals for yourself, and try risky things and experiment and these kind. You have to kind of be in a at least moderately healthy place to be able to make those kinds of decisions and hit those kinds of goalposts in a way that's going to be meaningful for other people to actually engage in and share that art.
The way, sorry, Ellie, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think as well, in terms of music, it's such a competitive place to be, that if there's a manager who's looking to, I don't know, work with a new artist, and you're amazing, but you can't hold it together, it's not, they're not going to want to work with you. Whereas if you're maybe not as good, but you turn up on time and you work hard, then people are more likely to be interested in what you're doing, I think. And I don't know, I just feel that talent needs to be, you need to have the skills to engineer it and propel it into the right place. You can be very talented, but then you may not have those skills in order to do that. And I think it's very important that not to buy into the I'm an artist, I can do whatever I want, I'm a creative, I'm a free spirit. Because I think everyone's been there at one point, and then you learn the hard way. When you get ill or your body's just no. Yeah, so I don't know. That's just my opinion on it.
Well, it leads to something. I was almost going to have my provocation be, artists are boring. And I knew that would require some context, and basically that came from a documentary filmmaker who has looked at artists' lives, creatives' lives, and has said, a lot of the work is just pretty mundane, just showing up, getting things done, and that's not as in some ways as dramatic and compelling as some of the stories we hear as the mythology. But I mean, it's certainly a significant part of being an artist and getting things done. And I imagine everyone here on this panel would agree with that.
Well, part of that, to interject, is also probably confirmation bias. So it's fun to hear about the people who went through these, dramatic sort of, insanities and madnesses that you're talking about. Those are the stories we like to hear, because it's fun to think, on the one hand, about it, that we like conflict, right? We like stories of people going through struggle and these kinds of things. Those are the stories that we pass on to other people and that we mythologize. nobody mythologizes the completely healthy person that's functioning perfectly well and still manages to make great art. Like, there's just nothing to talk about there. And so because of that, we just don't count the number of great artists that are that way, and we don't think about that number.
And again, it seems that there's not much argument that the vast majority of people are those, vast majority of artists are those healthy artists. We just don't hear as much about them, as you say. Can suffering contribute to creativity? Maybe I'll start here. Just change it up a bit, Andrew.
I think my creativity or my dedication to the art created suffering. So again, engaging with the lifestyle of being a DJ, naturally quite introvert, we're introverts, music technologists, DJs running around on tour, you're around people all the time, you're actually on your own, you're not around friends and family, drinking, partying, so you've got the highs and the lows and the highs and the lows, and that was a big part of my chronic anxiety. I suffer from chronic anxiety, and that was a big contribution. So you're in the studio on your own, you're on tour on your own, you're just on your own. And it's a great lifestyle, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but for me, it was the art that caused the suffering.
Very interesting.
And yeah, I've seen both sides of it. I wouldn't ever say that my suffering... There might have been times where I was low, and I was like, right, I don't want to be this person, and that would give me drive to get out of that and create, because I didn't want to be that person. So in that sense, I guess it contributed towards art, because I didn't want to be that person suffering. But actually, the suffering came from my art.
Isabel, have you had specific difficult experiences that you've utilized in your work?
Yes, but also I feel like we are going to talk about and write about everything that we experience, the good and the bad. So yeah, in a way I feel like yes, but also the good things have also inspired me to make art. So it's just, yeah.
So there's no special status that
I don't think so. I think
difficulty
it's a
has.
very true-to-life representation. There's a very one-to-one ratio to life and art in that sense.
Ellie?
I don't know. I think some suffering is like you don't want to talk about it for a while, and it may not come out in your art till later on. Other things can come out quite quickly. I don't know, in terms of does it actually drive your art, I don't think so, because well, this is just my opinion, but I feel like I have to create stuff all the time, and because it's part of who I am and it's what I'm good at. So if I'm having a bad day, then I go in the studio and I write something, and then I feel better, and then I go home and I'm like, well, I've achieved something, you know what I mean? But in terms of like drawing on bad experiences and feeling upset or feeling down, I don't think it necessarily drives what I'm doing. It may come into it at certain points, but the creating is always there. So the creating's at the core of it, and then other things happen, and they'll like slot in at certain points, but if there's suffering, it may not come out straight away. Yeah, so like a few years ago, I had really bad anxiety. It's called like high performance anxiety, and you kind of like, everything has to be perfect, and you have, you just work really, really hard all the time, and you kind of lose perspective. And I think what that taught me is, going there all the time and feeling like you have to suffer to create good stuff it's just like, yeah, it's a story that people use to sell music. Because at the end of the day, like, you don't want to watch a TV program that's all about people just like being nice to one another. And you want to watch some drama and people fighting, and it's the same in music.
And well, that's very interesting here from the music perspective, because I'm like Mallory, thinking it film-wise most of the time. I remember thinking that, it's appropriate for Berlin. I know I've got to, in order to progress my, didn't go anywhere as a career, but my hoped for career as a musical artist was to go to Berlin and do copious amounts of drugs like Bowie, and that would be some kind of formula that would make it happen. And I don't think it would have worked. I might have been here in the audience somewhere as opposed to up front here. Mal, I mean, do we get anything as artists from suffering? Do we get anything special from suffering as opposed to other experiences?
As opposed to other experiences, no. I think the whole range of human emotions is valuable to an artist to be able to, I mean, that's what we're trying to transmit is the entire spectrum of everything that is the human experience. I don't think that, I mean, suffering is certainly one part of it. Me personally, if I'm suffering, I don't feel like making art. I feel like feeling sorry for myself, and I make art because it's fun, and when I'm in a good place, and I want to transmit those sorts of positive feelings. I'm not one to sort of dwell, but it is necessary to process some of the negative stuff that happens through art. But I'm only able to function and do it when my head is clear and I'm feeling good and I'm feeling positive and confident, and that the work coming out is it doesn't always work out that way, but that's sort of the only time when it does work. It's when I'm feeling that way for sure.
Perhaps one of the challenges that we have, given the appeal of those extreme stories, that those mythologies that are appealing almost despite ourselves at times, is to make the everyday that's not suffering more compelling. That is a challenge, as opposed to going to the easy sort of I think the word I was going to use, like the spectacle of difficulty.
Because it makes it unreachable, doesn't it? Like, if someone has been through so much to make the album, you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I would never be able to do that. Because maybe they've stayed in a log cabin for a year and been depressed and wrote this amazing album, and that kind of makes it special and unique and something that you can't emulate. I think when people feel that they could do it themselves, the magic is gone,
That's exactly right. Like that's why we mythologize that conflict in people, because we think like, this is such an incredible work of art. It must have taken this heroic, inhuman sort of incredible experience in order for that to come out, because I can't make that art. So in order for me to like justify that another human being did this, it must have been this otherworldly, level of experience they went through. It must have been suffering or drugs or something that they did that activated this in them, and it wasn't just hard work that got them there.
We'll get into this as well around the idea of genius that I was looking at for the second half of this conversation. It seems that perhaps you were tempted to go to the cabin the same way I was tempted to come to Berlin and make our art in those special circumstances that would help to propel us forward.
Have you seen the film Sullivan's Travels?
Yes.
Heard of it? Yeah. So the premise of the film is it's 1941. It's an older black and white film, and it takes place in old Hollywood when, and it looks like an old Hollywood film, fake sets and actors hamming it up and stuff. But the plot of it is this film producer, old Hollywood film producer, and he's sick of making these like schlocky comedies, these crowd-pleasing comedies for everybody. And he's like, I want to make something that matters. I want to make art that is real, that really is going to move people. And I've been living in this ivory tower for too long. I need to get in touch with real human suffering, with real human misery. And so he's like, I'm going to go live like a hobo for like a month, and then I'm going to take those experiences and I'm going to turn them into a great film. And the producers are like, I don't know if it's such a good idea. And he goes out and he dresses up like a hobo and he goes out on the road, but all these journalists hear about it and they're following him around. And he's like, this isn't what I want. I'm not supposed to fake being a hobo. I want to actually be a hobo. So he kind of runs away, and in the process of this like misadventure that he has, he loses his identification. He gets robbed, so his money's all gone. And then at some point, someone mistakes another hobo who's been hit by a train, this body, for him, reports him as dead.
Careful, you don't give it all away. People want to see the film.
Well, I have to. This is the great part. And spoiler. And so he's like literally now destitute. He's been left for dead. He thinks that he can't get back because he has no money, and he's in this literal place of sort of as a vagabond. And he's around this hobo fire with these other people, and one of the other guys warming his hands around the fire is like, man, what I always really liked was those schlocky comedies. Those films would really make me feel like better and not take me away from this life that I had. So he goes back and makes more of these Fuck, I can't really, but it's a great like, kind of exactly what you're talking about. It's like there is no cabin, there is no formula. There's the work that you do, and that's the important thing. Whatever you can bring to it, someone can take meaning from that.
I think that's the thing though, like when fantasy becomes reality, like when it's not funny anymore, like when you're actually destitute and you have no money and you're not playing at it, and you know that's kind of where people trip up and they really suffer for real, like not a joke, because you know if you play up to that or you start living a certain lifestyle that does damage your mind and your well-being, then you'll have to face the reality of that, which is not romantic at all. You know, it's hard and it's just not nice. So I think that's a really important thing, is like distinguishing the two. Like, okay, this is like a story that sells things, and this is like actually reality and like mental illness just as it is, rather than interlinked, you know, with something else.
Dark
I
side.
was just going to say about your experience, I'm going to come right to you about that, the romanticizing of your...
Yeah, who wants to suffer? It's horrible. I don't care how great you think your art's going to be, it's not worth it. It's just horrible to suffer. I think it was David Lynch that said, suffering is not required, it's time and self-reflection. And from that comes pain a lot of the time. You know, you're beating yourself up, am I not good enough, not being received well, or... for me, my anxiety goes way back before my music career. So I've always suffered, but my lifestyle and my choices did definitely make it worse. So I always suffered. I was not a good student at school. I couldn't really concentrate. I didn't know why. I was always told that, yeah, I think you're intelligent, but you don't focus, you can't concentrate. And never did homework. Parents weren't really bothered. They said, have you done your homework? Yep, okay, cool. I hadn't, I couldn't do it. And all my friends would give their homework in. They always seemed to get on with the task in the classroom. And I never knew why. I actually thought I was stupid. And people were telling me, you know, you're going to amount to nothing, you're chasing pipe dreams with music. And from all of that, being beat up and being told I'm not good enough, it created an anxiety for me to prove a point. So from that, like you, the kind of hyper side of it, I'm fully functional. And actually, in a weird way, I think my anxiety has fueled a lot of my success. But have I appreciated it? Have I enjoyed it? I'm always 10 steps ahead. And I've achieved some great things. You know, everything I set out to achieve, I've achieved. And I've set realistic kind of goalposts, and I've reached them every single time. And then I always take the bar higher every single time, and nothing's ever good enough. I left school with no qualifications, and now I have a master's degree in advanced music technology, and I'm going to start a PhD. But that's not good enough. I don't appreciate it. I don't, you know, I don't know who I'm trying to prove a point to, but the constant self-reflection of thinking I'm not good enough or being told from very early on, that in itself causes suffering as well. So, yeah. It's weird because definitely my anxiety has fueled most of what I've done, I would say, because I'm just on it 100 miles an hour all the time, taking on ridiculous challenges, like being told that I was not very good at school, and actually it was just chronic anxiety, and that was before we labelled people, to then do a master's degree 20 years later after leaving education, nearly having a nervous breakdown. Masters, I haven't even got a GCSE. You know, and it was like such a shock. I had to get counselling and therapy along the way, but I did it, and I was 3% away from getting a scholarship to a PhD. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if I would have achieved half the things I would have achieved.
Just actually taking the question right out of my mouth. I mean, maybe just to rephrase it just slightly then. I mean, do you feel that, I appreciate what you're saying, that anxiety fueled a lot of the achievements that you've managed, but do you think that with proper guidance that there was another way to where you are now?
I don't know. Yes, I think so, because what I always say to my students is, yes, you can, because I did, and it's me, it's not my anxiety, it is me that did it, but yes, with the right guidance and the right support, yes, you can do it. You know, I never believed I would ever get a master's. It was rubbish at school, like really bad. So yes, I think actually with the right support and the right guidance and the right advice to not glorify suffering for a start.
And not to say that it's again, there's no formula. It's like not for everyone is going to be your path, and it takes a lot of work and energy to find those encouragements, those right paths for particular people to take. I think that's a responsibility that we have to try to find those rather than glorifying paths that people have taken that have been very problematic. Ellie, you were going to jump in at one point there, I thought, with what Andrew said.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, like, being anxious or having anxiety, it's hard to separate like who you are from that, because it's part of your personality. And I suppose it's just like anything, you have to manage it and kind of steer it in the right way and try and use the good bits of it. Because even people who like suffer from depression, like if they can write really good music from that, then that's okay. But then, you know, you need to be able to just keep a handle on it so you can function as well. But yeah, I was just gonna point out, yeah, it's hard to differentiate between.
Isabella, I mean, you're nodding your head there. Maybe you have something
yeah.
to add. I'll let you go ahead and add what you were thinking of there.
No, I was just gonna say that everyone I think has an amount of healthy anxiety, and then there's the chronic anxiety, mental illness anxiety, and there's that difference of like, yeah, about the two and like bringing that down. I like to joke with my friends because they always say that, how are you always so early to class and all those things? And I'm like, my anxiety wakes me up every day. But it does, and there is the line between too much and the healthy anxiety that's gonna propel you towards your goals and towards the things that you want to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you're talking about a range of experiences, and it's so easy again in this mythologizing that, I mean, that problematic word of madness. I mean, you know, we're talking about, you know, potentially very extreme states and situations to anxiety that gets you up, and maybe that is somewhat helpful, but you might not want it to be any more helpful than that, if that's a way to put it. I think something I have to touch upon here is medication. Again, a controversial topic in and of itself. I have a question here that I put the panelists previously. Can psychiatric medications have a negative impact on creativity? Interestingly enough, I keep tabs on, I live in the UK, keep tabs on the British papers, and today, big announcement of a study that said, antidepressants, they work, but it's only an 8-week study that they've put in. So I think maybe that the celebration is premature. But there has been a lot of concern about the many different ways to put it, but the flattening effects of medication. And I'm wondering if anyone on the panel wants to speak to this. Certainly I have my opinions on it.
Yeah, I've taken everything. They tried me on antidepressant type stuff, and then the last thing I took, I forget the name, but it was for people that suffer with epilepsy, but a lower dose to suppress the anxiety. I tried beta blockers for the heart, and some of it worked, but I was a zombie. The last medication, the one that was used for the epilepsy patients, I was slurring my words, or I thought I was slurring my words, and I was teaching, and I just felt like everything was in slow motion, but it worked. And throughout my master's, towards the end, I was on medication, and it allowed me to focus while I was writing dissertations and stuff. But then there were after effects, so, you know, side effects, not being able to sleep. Yeah, so I've taken them, and I think what worked for me over that was therapy, one-to-one therapy. But I tried everything they threw at me to start off with.
So, I mean, what some people would say is, of course, the right medication at the right time, and they don't always get it right at the right time.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to approach these issues.
Well, without medication, I wouldn't have got through it. Meditation, and therapy got me through my master's. Towards the end of that, I realised it was actually the therapy and the meditation that was doing it. But it was a vicious circle because I couldn't come down enough to meditate, which was, you know, it's kind of a vicious circle. You're up there. How do you then bring yourself down? And I did CBT, cognitive behavior stuff, none of that worked. And, but yeah, there was a time when the drugs did work for me.
Does anyone else want to speak on that at all?
Yeah. I think there's such a fear of medication, I think, with mental illness, and I always encourage everyone that I feel like is struggling with it to just go to the doctor, because I don't think it's that scary if it doesn't work. There are a lot of side effects. In my experience, I was really lucky, and I am on antidepressants, and what I tried the first time worked for me. But there were really bad side effects the first 2 weeks. But I feel like if any chronic illnesses, there are physical things that aren't going to be so good. And yeah, I think it is a little bit of a trade-off and of trying things. And if it doesn't work out, just don't do it anymore and try something else. But I think it is a process, and I feel like, it should be encouraged for everyone to feel like, yeah, you can do this, and if you can't, that's okay. And I don't know, to be more open about it. Yeah, because it is, the medication mental illness is something that's like, oh, it's hush hush. I can't, oh, you have mental health issues, are you crazy? Yeah.
I think it's important. I mean, so much of this world is so unknown still. I mean, much more is known than before. But I mean, I know someone, head of psychiatry at the University of Edinburgh, who said it's the tip of the iceberg stuff right now that we know. All sorts of varying opinions right across the scale, from people to no medication ever to this, as I was seeing in headlines today, this is the answer. But I mean, I think it's myself, it's that idea of, well, everyone is an individual, and and individuals go through changes, as you've mentioned as well. There'll be different things at different times, and if this is approached with in the spirit of trying to help each other be the best we can be, and so that we can be healthy and productive artists, that's what we want.
I think you need to remember, to be an artist takes drive, commitment, determination. The music industry is ruthless. It will spit you out without even considering anything you've done for it. And if you're not on the ball, it's dog eat dog out there. It really is. So, and if you're in a hole, you're not on the ball. So, yeah.
I'll move on to, and getting to the idea of genius very, very soon. I think it's important we get to that. What are the concerns for those who reveal themselves through their work? I mean, we talked about whether art is confessional to some extent, or it can be a made-up story in a way, or made-up situation that people address successfully in their art. But do we have to be concerned about artists who are being vulnerable, being open? I mean, Ellie, how do you approach your songwriting? I mean, is it confessional in a sense, or is there just a wide range that you address?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I'll write about things that have happened ages ago, and it's taken me so long to process it and so long to work out what to say, that by the time it comes out, I know it's right. So if I force something out that isn't ready, then it won't be right, or especially with lyrics. So if I'm like writing poetry about an event, it just doesn't feel like it's quite there, and I don't know why, and it's because I haven't processed how I feel about it enough in order to then write about it.
You don't want it to be as there's a rawness there that maybe doesn't work for you.
I wouldn't say it's rawness. I just say it's more like you have to allow yourself to really understand how you feel about it before you project it onto your work, because otherwise you're talking rubbish. That's how I think about it. In terms of like authenticity and how people feel about songwriting, and like should it be from the heart and all of that sort of stuff, like I think it just depends on what kind of music you're making, and like how
It's
you
not a
want to
value
approach it.
judgment.
It's not, no, it's nothing to do with that. And I think like people, like artists who don't write their own songs, who maybe like collaborate with other songwriters, you know, a lot of it won't be from the heart, but if they're good performers and they can sing it in a way that makes people feel something, that's the important thing. Because at the end of the day, it's for the people who are listening to it, really.
I'm wondering, Mal, if you would disagree with that in any way, just given what you had said at the beginning, no?
No, in fact, I think there's so much more to making art that moves people. There's so much more skill than there is magic in that, and time and work put into getting there. And I think that it gets a little bit into the sort of genius aspects of maybe talking about later. But yeah, no, I actually totally agree.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously some artists base their, like, story around the fact that they're very authentic and people work hard to create that. You know, like, people in labels have the job in order to curate a story that makes someone feel a certain way when they follow that artist. And I think a lot of it is a lot more manufactured than people think, in my opinion. But it's easy to take it on face value and get sucked in to the story.
Isabella, how do you approach your songwriting and how autobiographical is it?
I think that music and writing and every type of art, it can be from the heart, but not true to life. And yeah, because sometimes I'll be writing and it starts off something that has happened, but the song leads me in another way. And you're present in that moment and you're true to that song. You're true to yourself in that moment, but it's not something that happened. That still has some meaning. At least it does to me. So I feel like that's my view on it.
I think that idea of manufactured authenticity, if I can put it that way, I can see that in across media, and I mean I think that can be potentially dangerous for people who so associate their selves with their public persona and what it means if that public persona is attacked, vilified, especially in these days of social media criticism. You know, like here I am, I'm putting my heart out. I've been told to put my heart out through my work, and people are telling me my heart is wrong. Let's say, Andrew, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I think it's inspiration we're looking for, isn't it? Whether we find that from our pain or our happiness, or just looking for inspiration, being open-minded. For me, as a electronic music producer, the best thing I ever did was open my ears to other genres, because I was so fixated on one genre, the genre I wanted to be a part of. And by growing up and being open to other sounds, I found the world of inspiration. And that is what I think we look for as artists. But like you were saying earlier, we go through certain journeys and experiences in our life anyway to be able to attach ourselves to at least emotions, and then you can find other types of inspiration within other music or from other people or experiences. So I think that's the key. It's inspiration we're looking for, not pain.
I like the way, Isabella, you put it as well, that being true to the song, I think, is or something along those lines. I think it's real important.
Yeah, and actually, like, I think there's as artists, I think we think too much about ourselves. Like, I think there's just too much self-absorption about, like, oh, my art and me and what I feel and what I think. And I tell this to my students a lot, that, like, you know, when you make a film and people go and see it, they're not going to see you and your film. They don't care about you. They care about themselves. When people go into the cinema, they want to see themselves on the screen. They want to see their own experiences. They want emotions. They want to see themselves reflected on the stories that are being told. And so it's not like we get this sense, we associate the art with the artist because it's the artist the one that's making it. But I almost feel sometimes that that's almost coincidental. That relationship, that art belongs as much to the person that is consuming it and taking something from it as it does to the person who creates it. And so, yeah, I think people get way too worked up about themselves and their own ideas of what's important. And when people don't receive that well, then they think that they're wrong. And no, that means that you've created the work poorly, and it's not in a way that's accessible to people in a way that it should be.
Well, oftentimes I think we ask too much of our artists, and that sort of that personal kind of vulnerability, and maybe a way that certain people get beyond that is to have a persona. I mean, I don't know if that's Nomine or if that's Lamia, but I mean, that putting a barrier there to say, look, don't automatically associate me with my art, do you feel that way then to some extent with your own work?
It's very important. You have to have a different space in your mind for your music and your art that isn't you. Because, otherwise people just can't see any difference between the two. And I mean, for me, I needed another space that was like a different variation of me in order to create and just be relaxed about it and be free with it, because it was detached from like Ellie. So it kind of gave me another space to experiment and play around, and there was like no rules in that kind of headspace. So that I think it just really, really helps. I know one of my really close friends, she's also like an artist under her own name, and she finds it a bit stressful sometimes because like people search her name, but then obviously her like personal Facebook comes up, which is fine, but it just means that like everything is attached to her music rather than her artist name and her music, if you see what I mean.
Isabel, have you thought about how you want to approach this? Are you making music under your own name? And
I'm really thinking about it, which is interesting to hear because I am planning on releasing a few songs for the first time in the summer. So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, which is a good thing to think about. But yeah, an artist name seems like a good idea. Definitely, yeah.
I'm kind of jealous of artists, like of
say
musicians.
exactly
Yeah, this is how great is that to have this thing that everyone accepts? Like, oh yeah, it's your artist persona. Like that's a thing that it's so common in film. It's like nobody,
You're Mal, I'm Richard.
and that's it. Like it's the films that we make. And
I think it's kind of cool to have your name. I know a few people have their name. For me, Outrage was this nutter that drank a bottle of vodka behind the decks, pulled his pants down in the middle of a set, and that wasn't me. It was me when I was in a certain environment and people knew me for that. The name obviously matched that behaviour. And Nomine, I'm very open and honest. Nomine is me. I talk openly about mental health on social media. I don't talk about my family and stuff. I don't have a personal Facebook. It's just music related, so I don't do all that sharing stuff about my family. I keep that stuff to myself. But Nomine is very much me and my personality rather than my private life. So I'm very open about everything, and people seem to resonate with that, especially with regards to the mental health thing. I'm always very open on social media about mental health, and I have a lot of people contacting me, thanking me for being so open. Sometimes some really tricky messages that I don't really know how to deal with, because once you open yourself up to that, people, want to come to you for advice, asking what medication can I take, and just go and get help is what I would suggest. But yeah, so for me, my artist name right now is me being true and honest, and people seem to resonate with that, which is really nice.
I think what I'm getting is that I mean, we have to take care of ourselves, and that can be again sort of a range of approaches. That whether it's using a name that's more separate from oneself, or maybe partway closer to you, but not entirely open, and that we just have to be thinking about how our presentation to the world can impact the way we feel about ourselves. And as artists, if we're agreeing that to be healthy is the way to be productive and carry on with our art over time, that we have to take these things into consideration. And I do think it's worth repeating. I think it's important, however that plays out in a world where you have all sorts of critics out there, just to take care of yourself, really. I wanted to make sure to get on to the idea of genius. I'll just ask the question without giving much context here, and then I'll weigh in if need be, but happy for you four to do it for me. What role does genius play in outstanding artistic accomplishment? Mal.
What is genius? Like,
Yeah, I thought that might be the response, yeah.
Maybe it's what we were talking about earlier, this need for people to attribute success in an artistic sense to something that's bigger than just a human being doing something for a while until they're good at it. You know, like, I think that's too easy. People want to think that there's something inborn in people, or that there's some kind of divine, inspiration that comes in order to take a simple, humble human being and turn them into a vessel for some kind of artistic endeavor. And I don't know that I believe that the idea of genius exists, except maybe in that sort of fictional definition.
Well, it's certainly a term that's become more prevalent than it was in the past. I mean, sort of bandied about, you're a genius. And I do think that there is a certain amount of sort of both pressure to be that person, and also it means that you can sort of separate yourself from that and think, well, that's either God-given talent or not, you know, that you can sort of step away from that kind of pressure. But it's a...
No, I think honestly it's just shorthand for someone saying, I could never do what you're doing, or I could never do what that person is doing. And it's just a way of excusing themselves from the work that goes into that. I mean, you brought up Mozart, everyone, that not everyone could be Mozart. Mozart was, the reason he was doing stuff so early is because his parents at age 3 were making him do 13, 14 hours a day of practice. It wasn't that he just came out of absolutely nowhere. Like, he was drilling.
He was working at it.
He was working at it, you know, against his will or not. And so I just think I think this happens within the artist community too, because we see people that are the people we look up to, people that we think, and we're like, how do they do that? How does this person you know, for me personally, it's the Coen brothers. I have looked at and broken down films and storytelling, and it's a personal passion of mine to like figure out the mechanics of storytelling and how it works. And when I watch a film by them, it just doesn't play by any of those rules, and it somehow works. And it's like, I don't know how they're doing it. It's some sort of witchcraft. And that, I think, you know, that's the temptation to attribute genius to that, and just go like, whatever they're doing, it's not something I have, and it's not something that, you know, so
Well,
it
that's
must
sort of
be.
by sort of for putting them up on a pedestal, but actually, you know, it's not to say you haven't done enough of the work yet, but I mean, it is putting in the work that is important.
I've been very lucky enough to sit down with some of my peers in the music industry that when I was coming through, I really looked up to. Some producers that I thought were gods, and they actually still are to me, but I've been in the studio and I've been able to see how they work. And I'm like, is that it? Very basic, just don't know half of what I know, but actually they can lay down a great idea, and it's very simple, very basic, but it's the work ethic and it's their determination that makes them that genius over any scientific kind of tricks and fancy things they're doing in the studio. It's none of that. It's just very simple, on it when they need to be on it, finish what they start, and that's where the genius comes from.
They put their pants on one leg at a time like everyone else.
Exactly. And then it's happened so many times. I've got in the studio and I'm like, right, here we go.
Yeah.
But the result has been that genius status because of just their commitment. And often as well, what you find, especially in the music industry, people will surface and become stars. And actually you look, unless they're kind of really lucky and they've broke at an early age, they've been grafting for like a good decade. At least. A lot of people that break through in the music industry, they've done a lot of hard work. Whenever you read their interviews, they haven't just been around for 5 minutes. All these DJs and producers, they've done a lot to get where they get to. It's very rare that someone just breaks and it's luck. That's very rare.
For me, what's been difficult around the idea of genius is that one either sort of has it or they don't, that they can just jump in and be perfect. It's around perfectionism. And to be an artist, I mean, again, feel free to disagree, but means making mistakes. Is that just, I mean, this work doesn't come out fully formed and pristine. But I find the idea intimidating that, oh, is that not what we're supposed to be in the arts? Are we not supposed to be at that level where everything we do is just genius?
I think it's more you do or you don't, rather than you can or you can't. You either do or you don't. That's.
I think you have to have a talent though to work on. Like I think that this idea that like anyone can do it if they work hard enough isn't really fair, because you wouldn't expect someone who isn't very good at maths to be like an amazing accountant. Like, if you have a skill, then you can work on it. And I think maybe genius comes from different factors. So being able to, use the talent that you have in a way that other people can't, rather than just saying, oh, it's about working and it's about, just putting in the hours, because some people, aren't that musical. Like, naturally, they don't have the ear for it, or like they can practice as much singing as they want, but they're not going to be as good as like someone who's talented, and that's just how it is. Like, I think it's not fair to romanticize the idea of like working really, really hard and like being whoever you want to be, because like you have to have those skills underneath to then work on. As well, you'll just make yourself miserable. Like, if you're really bad at something and you try really, really hard and you're still really bad, then you're what are you doing? Like, do something you're good at and work on that, because otherwise you're just going to be so unhappy.
No matter how much time I put in, I was never going to be a pro basketball player. I hated that. I was a good keeper in football. Thought I had a feel for that ball, but not the basketball. And it was never going to work.
Yeah,
I think it's a fair point to make, and so maybe it's more about identifying those skills that one should develop, as opposed to just feeling anyone can do it if they put the time in.
Yeah, you have to make the most of what you've got. Yeah, you have to make the most of what you've got and like play your cards right, and not like exhaust yourself on things which just aren't going to work out for you, I think. Because I wanted to be really good at chemistry and I tried really hard and I just wasn't.
I think all of us can come up with examples like that.
I just didn't have it, and that was fine. I just did something else. But yeah, I just think you have to be real as well.
But I think you can do it with a spark. You don't need to have. I wasn't the best at what I did, but my grafting and my anxiety and what I put into it made me or helped me get to my goals. So I had a love for music. I wanted to be a DJ, I wanted to be a producer. Found it very hard for many years, but I stuck with it. And 20 years on, I'm still doing it. So I think you're right. I think, for me to say, I'm going to go and learn Russian in the next kind of few months would be probably a bit too ambitious and unrealistic. But I think, if you've got a love for something and there is a spark, that can then blossom into something with hard work and dedication.
Yeah, if you've got the skills and you've got the intrigue in the beginning.
I didn't have the skills. I have no skills. When I first opened that music program, it was like, what is this? And I was scared of it for years. I didn't have the skills. Didn't have computer skills. Didn't have any of the logical skills that go into DJing or...
Well, skills not necessarily in terms of like being able to be a master straight away at Ableton. I don't mean that, but in terms of like your musicality.
Yeah.
Being able to hear things and like not being tone deaf and having a feel. Like, I don't mean like, I can do Ableton, I have skill. Like, that's not.
No, I think you're right. There needs to be a spark and a passion and a love, definitely. I mean, I was tone deaf for many years as well. Until I started to learn, I did some basic piano lessons. And people would send a track, there's a bum note there, that's not in key. I was like, what? I can't hear that. But again, I took some piano lessons and I forced muscle memory in my ears and I trained my ears. But I'm no Mozart. I can now do chord progressions and I can identify a bum note. I listened to classic FM for a whole year in my car. Somebody told me by listening to classical music, you can train your ears. And now I can hear that bum note. But 5-6 years ago, I couldn't.
But the expectation that, I think the expectation to kind of like feel that you have to be up there straight away. Like,
oh yeah, it took 20 years and I'm still striving for something.
I think that expectation can be debilitating. If you think this is what I'm saying, if I'm supposed to be here, can I not work my way up to that?
That's what I had. I set myself realistic goals. I knew kind of what the top goal was, and I did shoot for that. But I also knew realistically the ladder I had to climb to realistically get to that point.
It's good to have mentors to help you along the way.
And I was very lucky to have that as well. So
Isabel, when did you know that you wanted to be a musical artist?
This wasn't the question you asked before.
I'm not prepared for that.
I wasn't prepared for that.
She's got her answer ready and you just switched it up.
It was a process. I think when I was 9, my dream was to be in a band. And because me and my friends would always, let's pretend we're in a band. And I would be like writing songs and they all would get bored. And I was the only one that stuck with the guitar. So I just kept playing and didn't take it seriously. And then I wrote a lot. I always wrote a lot. And I got into poetry and then singing too later on. And so it all sort of ended up tying itself together. And I was like, oh, being a musician would make sense. It has everything that I like.
So sort of a natural kind of thing that
Yeah, it was a
occurred without you
natural thing.
pushing towards something or having this bolt of lightning that says, this is what I need to be.
No, not at all. But the production was definitely a more sudden thing because I had a friend who was doing the songwriting and then the producing, and that was sort of, oh, maybe I should try that because that seems interesting. But I was very scared because it seemed very difficult, and everything technology related always really scared me. And I was like, oh, but if I go into sound engineering, is there going to be math? Because I'm really bad at math. And then I had to work on that. I've been working on it the past year, and now, yeah, and it's been a journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think again and again, what we see is there are individual situations, individual processes, individual things that can help that don't necessarily follow a pattern. We're getting close to time that we're wanting to open it up to the audience here. Just wanted to ask everyone on the panel a last couple of questions. Yes, the questions that I had sent you before. So I expect a well-prepared answer, especially from you. What does long-term creativity contribute to well-being? Isabel? Should I repeat the question?
I believe that. No, but I think that it's a good way for dealing with your own emotions and of processing things. So I feel like it's a lot like having a therapist. You get to make a song, you get to write everything down, figure things out for yourself, and yeah.
I've often referred to creativity as self-administered art therapy. It seems that's what you're saying.
Definitely.
Okay. Andrew?
I think for me, the sense of achievement, always setting myself new goals when I reach a certain goal, and then, yeah, just achievement, really.
That's positive for you, and I mean, I have down here a sense of purpose. Achievement is helpful in that way. Ellie?
What was the question?
That's all right. What does long-term creativity contribute to well-being for you?
Long-term creativity.
So you're an artist. You continue to make work. How do you feel that, if it does, help for your own well-being?
Oh yeah, no, it's really helpful because, well, obviously because if you're processing things, aren't you? It's like talking to someone else, but they're not there. It's just you. So a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have that in life. Like something bad happens, and they go to work, and they come home, and they can't speak to anyone about it, and they can't make anything with it. It's just there. Whereas like artists, I suppose, in a way, are lucky because we can make those things into something tangible, and then when you've written a song and it's finished, it's kind of gone, and then the kind of grieving or what went with that has also gone as well. That's how I see it anyway.
Great. And Mal, in your work, in your creative work, how does that help you, if it does, as to be healthy, to be well?
Well, being creative makes me happy. Sometimes I'm on the subway and I'm looking at like these people coming home from work, and I'm thinking like, I bet you know, this guy is an accountant or a house painter or a, you know, whatever, a doctor, or, well, he's probably not in the subway if he's a doctor, but, and he, you know, these people, I'm thinking, they probably didn't go spend their whole day like with these crazy visions and things jumping around in their head and all these insane, like that's how like my day from beginning to end is just like managing visions basically and like trying to grapple them, and that's really fun. That's a joy, and I can't imagine what it would be like for somebody to go through life every single day and not have access to that. Like that seems like, I mean, what a way to live, you know.
Well, I'm going to come closer to giving away the ending of Sullivan's Travels than you did, but there is a message in that film about just the power of enjoyment. That there is something to just doing something or experiencing something that makes you happy, and that's I think a fair enough answer.
But make sure you enjoy it
Yeah.
at the time, because it's easy to not enjoy it.
And my last question before we open it up, is there any practical advice that you would give towards being healthy and productive, creative people? And I'll start the way I started at the beginning of the night, work around this way.
With Mal. Practical advice. You kind of have to be disciplined with your creative work. You have to treat it, if you want it to be a job, you have to treat it like a job. And that means setting time specifically for that you focus on that and you will let that stuff happen. But that also means that that's a limit as well, and you allow it to not bleed into, like, you know, when you go home from work, you don't want that to bleed into your personal life. And when you come out of a creative space, there needs to be a place for you to turn that off as much as there is to turn that on. It doesn't mean that when you go into that space that spark's always going to be there, but you need to, this is what I do anyway, I need to create a time and place that's regular where I can treat it like something that's routine.
Okay, thanks. Ellie?
I mean, I can just say what works for me.
Yeah.
Exercise and like spending time in your body and not your mind. That really helps. Because if you spend too much time in your mind and not in your body, then it becomes unbalanced and you need both to function. So that's just how I deal with things, is that I do exercise. Or go for a run or cycle somewhere or go for a walk. And that, because I think so much of everything's based on perceptions, you know, and how you feel about something is usually triggered by something else that you experienced, or maybe you didn't have enough sleep, or you're in a bad place from something else that happened, and then you see everything bad, like a filter, I don't know. And then you have to kind of get rid of that and be like, oh, actually everything's kind of cool, it's just me being in a weird state of mind. So yeah, that's what I do.
Great. Andrew?
Sleep. It's good. Flushes out the toxins, which is always a good thing. Exercise. Love exercise. Running. Going to the gym. Just it's one of the few times that I'm actually present, which is nice. Teaching and exercise is when I'm present. Other than that, I'm 6 million miles away. And a practical thing that I've come across recently, if you suffer from procrastination or an anxious mind like me, is the Pomodoro technique. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, where you set yourself 25-minute timer, 25 minutes, and you pick a particular task, and you turn everything else distracting off around you, your phone, your internet, and you smash it in that 25 minutes. And at the end of the 25 minutes, you give yourself a treat, so a 5-minute break, quick game of the PlayStation, but be strict with it, or a cup of coffee. After about 4 different 25-minute blasts, give yourself a bigger treat, so go for a walk, but make sure there is a treat. Especially you students, anyone who's doing written work, essays and stuff, I used to sit there for 13 hours writing an academic paper and only have a paragraph. And this is my first introduction to the technique, I didn't know what it was called. I was on this student forum and it said, just do like half-an-hour bursts. I was like, I can't do it. And then have a 20-minute break. I was like, I can't do that. The first time I did that, I smashed out a 3,000-word essay in 2 days that was taking me 2 weeks before. But yeah, the Pomodoro technique is just 25 minutes, smash it, little break or a treat, another 25. And they can be different things. For me, I have I try to multitask and I spread myself thin. So the first 25 minutes could be your emails, so checking your emails and replying to your emails. Next, it can be, I don't know, another task, a studio-based task. Obviously, when being creative, we often find that sitting in the studio for hours on end can be, or we feel like we need that. But actually, again, those short bursts, even when sitting in the studio, I found to be quite productive. So try it out.
Thanks. And Isabella?
I was gonna say the sleep thing, very important. Regular sleeping schedule helps a lot. I know it's really hard for us here, DBS students in Berlin, but
I was going to say, Berlin seems to me the city that never sleeps. Forget New York.
but it makes a difference. And this might sound very unexpected from someone with social anxiety, but when you're in not such a good mood, people help. People are good. Talking to your friends and just being open about things and make sure you have a good support system, I think is just, yeah, helps a lot. Instead of retreating into yourself, go be with people and just, yeah, maybe do the opposite of what is like, yeah, holding you back. Just go and do it.
Thanks, Isabel. That was one of my points here. You were not alone, and I've made that mistake oftentimes, thinking partly because of the pressure that I felt of, it's genius or nothing. It's like, if I'm not getting it right, it's my problem, and I've got to figure it myself, and I don't want to make myself vulnerable by telling other people that I'm having problems, because then maybe I'm not the artistic genius that I need to be, and all sorts of people, even, well, everyone. I think I'd say everyone, whatever the mythologies, everyone has had their challenges, and there are people like the people here tonight that have been very open about their challenges, and it's good to hear about other people's challenges to help one with one's own. So momentarily going to turn it over to you for your comments and questions. I would also suggest from my own experience too, in the spirit of the night, to avoid the mythologies. However true the links we see with genius, with creativity and mental health issues. I mean, the focus should be being on a healthy person and a productive artist, and developing. We touched on this a bit, Andrew. This idea of developing strategies that are appropriate for oneself at a particular time. It's not going to be one answer for everyone, but rather than suffering, just look at what might work for you, and if it doesn't work, change it up and try something else, perhaps through having talked to friends about it. Thanks very much for the generosity of the panelists here, and they're with me for a bit yet.